Shalom and welcome to Simchat Yisrael. This week's Parsha is about the rebellion of Korach. And if you've been reading through the book of Numbers, you know by now that things are not going great. Before we get into the Parsha, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel down below. The first thing that the book of Deuteronomy tells us is that it's only an 11-day journey from Sinai to Canaan. But only a few days into the trip, and the Israelites are complaining about the food and wishing they were back in Egypt. The people are railing against Moses, and tensions are so high that even his siblings start turning on him. Next, they send men to go and spy out the land, and most of them bring back a bad report. If a leader says something is difficult, then the followers will say it's impossible. And if the leader says it's impossible, the followers will lose all hope. So when the spies tell Israel that they don't stand a chance against the Canaanites, the predictable happens and unchecked pessimism spreads throughout the camp until it becomes a full-scale revolt. Once again, the call goes out to abandon God and return back to Egypt and accept a life of slavery. At this point, God has had enough. He decides that this generation will wander in the desert for 40 years, and only then will God lead a new generation into the promised land. And that leads us to this week's Parsha. It's important to recognize that Korach didn't come out of nowhere. It's easy for us to judge the Israelites for being so faithless, but imagine what it must have been like to be an average person in the camp. Maybe someone who lived far from the center of the camp, where all the action took place. This is a camp of anywhere between 600,000 and 2 million people. News moves slowly and unreliably in an environment like that. If you were some average Zebulonite, what was your experience like so far? I imagine that ever since Moses showed up, your life has been the pendulum swinging between extreme boredom and terrifying danger. On a good day, you're just baking half to death in the hot desert sun, doing nothing. The Levites near the Mishkan get to see all the cool miracles you keep hearing about and do all the important, meaningful stuff. But don't worry, there's plenty of manna to be ground up and baked into cakes at least. But who knows? Maybe today will be an interesting day. Maybe we'll run out of water again. Or maybe one of your friends will get stoned to death for breaking some new law you hadn't even heard about yet. Maybe we'll be attacked by the Amalekites, or get struck by a plague for complaining that it's too hot. Apparently Moses has been reading the law in the center of the camp, but it takes like 3 weeks for the news to get back here. I'm just hearing about this golden calf thing now. The one silver lining is that at least in a few days, we'll be in the promised land. And all this heat and thirst and hunger and hardship and uncertainty will be behind us, and we can finally start our new lives. Oh wait, what's that? Oh, apparently news just arrived that we will not be going into land. Well, that's just fantastic. This whole miserable trip that was founded on the promise that we'd have a land of our own at the end of it has apparently been all for nothing, and the only thing I have to look forward to for the rest of my life is sunburn, scorpions, sand in my underpants, and manna for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week, 365 days a year for the next 40 years. Unless we get rid of Moses. Enter Korach. Was there ever a time so ripe for a power grab? Rabbinical sources tell us that Korach was a cousin of Moses and Aaron, and the leader of the Kohathites, a division of the tribe of Levi. Think about what Korach's life has been like. He started out as a slave in Egypt and then became a free man, but he was still the same status as every other Israelite. When the priestly class was established, it was the firstborn sons of every tribe that were to become priests. All of Israel was on equal footing. But then the sin of the golden calf occurred, and in the aftermath of that terrible ordeal, the tribe of Levi, Moses' own family, rose in prominence to become the new priestly class. Once again, Korach saw his position improving, but he still wasn't satisfied, because Korach was a Kohathite. He was part of the tribe of Levi, but his branch of the family didn't serve as priests. The way he saw it, an accident of birth was all that was preventing him from being part of the most elite class. Every day he would watch the Kohens going about their duties in the Mishkan and jealously covet their position, especially the status enjoyed by his cousin Aaron, the high priest. So as the situation in the camp became more and more tense, Korach saw an opportunity to take the power and position he so desired. But he was smart enough not to try to take it by himself. Korach cleverly gathered together other groups of people who felt similarly disenfranchised and jealous of the position held by the Levitical priests. Korach was encamped right next to the tribe of Reuben, and he gathered together 3 leaders from that tribe. The Reubenites believed that because their ancestor had been the firstborn son of Jacob, their tribe should enjoy prominence amongst Israel. These men wanted the Reubenites to replace the Levites as a priestly class and were willing to back Korach's claim to the high priesthood in order to get it. But Korach didn't stop there. He also created a coalition of 250 princes from all the different tribes. These men were the firstborn sons of the most prominent families of Israel, the very same men who lost the chance to become the priests during the sin of the golden calf. They had lost their position to the Levites, and now they wanted it back. Korach gathers all these power-hungry men together and promises to grant them their desires if they help him become the new leader of the nation. Korach is willing to cut ties with his own tribe and betray his own family in order to gain the power he desired. Together, they confront Moses and Aaron, and in front of the whole assembly, he accuses Moses. "You have gone too far," he tells them. "You have taken too much. You have gathered all of this power to yourselves, and you refuse to share it. Look at all these people. Are they not also the children of Israel? Are they not also holy? Isn't God with them as well? What right do you have to exalt yourself above them, to act as though you are better than they, to say that God only works through you?" The implication is clear. Moses and Aaron have failed the people. They should step down from their position of leadership. Now, should they have? Shouldn't the children of Israel have the right to choose their own leaders? To choose its own destiny? Isn't that what freedom is all about? And why wouldn't Moses give up his position if that's what the people want? We know that Moses is a very humble man, certainly not the type to hold on to power for the sake of his own ego. Just a few chapters ago, God took some of the Holy Spirit that was on Moses and placed it on the heads of 70 elders of the tribes, spreading some of Moses' authority among them. Was Moses upset about this? Not at all. In fact, when Joshua became upset about this, Moses told him, "Are you jealous on my behalf? If only Adonai would make all the people prophets. If only Adonai would put the Spirit on all of them." Why does Moses react so differently this time? Isn't Korach asking for the same thing? For Moses to share some of his authority with them? What's wrong with that? The answer is, there's nothing wrong with that. Every great leader desires to share his influence. Toward the end of his life, God instructs Moses to transfer his leadership to his disciple Joshua. God instructs Moses to lay his hands on Joshua and impart his spirit onto him. The sages in the commentary on this verse say that the act of laying hands is like lighting one candle to another. Up until now, Moses has been that candle. He is the one who has been bringing the light of his influence to the nation of Israel all this time. When he lays his hands on Joshua and lights another flame, will his own candle go out? Not at all. The light of his influence will be doubled. Joshua will carry Moses' influence into the land and spread it even further. When God placed the Holy Spirit on the 70 elders, Moses was not upset because he knew that his influence had been increased, not diminished. God was sharing his light among the people, not taking it away. So why then is this situation with Korach different? It's because Moses realized that Korach can't tell the difference between influence and power. Many people don't realize there's a difference. After all, people who have power are often influential, and influential people usually have some power. But the Torah teaches that these two things are so different that they're assigned to two separate roles: kings and prophets. Power is the domain of the king. A king can levy taxes and conscript armies. They can wage war and punish crime. Prophets have no power at all. They can't tax anyone or raise any armies. They may speak the word of God, but they have no way to enforce it. All a prophet has is influence. But here's the thing. Can you name 5 prophets off the top of your head? I can name a whole bunch of prophets. Moses, Elijah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Jonah. The list goes on and on. Meanwhile, I lost track of the kings of Israel after David and Solomon. Elijah's fight against corruption. Isaiah's visions of the world to come. John's voice crying out in the wilderness, claiming the coming of the Messiah. These are stories that still move us today by the sheer force of their inspiration. These men have lit thousands of flames over the centuries, and thousands of years after their deaths, their light burns brighter than ever. The same can't be said for the likes of Jehoshaphat or Jehu. David and Solomon are remembered today for their psalms and wisdom, not the laws they passed or the wars they fought. Power forces people to behave in a certain way. Influence teaches them to see the world differently so that they can change themselves. The use of power diminishes others. The spread of influence enlarges them. Korach isn't looking for influence. If that was what he wanted, Moses would gladly share it with him. Korach wants power. The sages teach that if influence is like a flame being passed from candle to candle, power is like water being poured from one bowl to another. When one candle lights another, the light is doubled. When water is poured from one bowl to another, it just gets divided in half. Influence can be shared, but power cannot without threat to authority. If there are competing sources of power within a single body, there can be no leadership. Moses must either put down the rebellion or fatally compromise the office with which he has been charged. So Moses knows he can't share his power, but if the people want a new leader, why shouldn't he just step down and allow Korach to try to maybe do things better? Putting aside the fact that God has commissioned Moses in his task, and he has no authority to renounce the honor given to him, Moses knows that Korach is not a suitable leader for the people of God. Moses can see right through Korach's rhetoric. Korach presents himself as a man of the people. All the community is holy, he says. We're all equal. And yet it would seem that Korach thinks that some people are more equal than others. For someone running on a platform of equal distribution of power, he sure does seem to be looking to get the biggest equal portion for himself. Korach isn't a Democrat. He's a demagogue, using the fears and uncertainties of the people as fuel to further his ambitions. Moreover, Moses can see that the coalition that Korach has put together can't possibly stand. There are two separate groups within Korach's faction, the Reubenites and the firstborn sons. Both groups are after the same thing, the priesthood, and Korach has promised it to both of them. Korach is playing both sides of the fence and won't hesitate to discard his allies once they've served their purpose. But worst of all, Korach doesn't understand what it means to be a leader in God's kingdom. Korach is clever when he makes his argument against Moses and Aaron. He makes a few undeniably true statements and then mixes a lie into the truth to give it credence. When Korach says that all the people are holy, that's true. God has called his people to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And when he says that God is with all of them, that's true too. That was the point of building the Mishkan, to give God a place to dwell among the people and to be with them wherever they went. Where Korach was wrong was in his third statement. Why then do you set yourself above God's people? There's a theory in psychology called projection. It's where people defend themselves against their own worst qualities by denying that they exist while attributing them to others. That's what's happening here with Korach. Korach is an ambitious man, so of course he reasons that Moses and Aaron must have the same drives and motivations as he does, the desire to be above the people. With this one word, Korach reveals himself to be unworthy of being a leader in God's kingdom. Moses is wise enough to know that while he is the leader of the nation, he is not above the people. Moses represents the birth of a new kind of leadership. In Moses' time, the pyramids of Egypt were the great symbols of the ancient world, but they were more than just buildings. They were statements in brick and stone of how the world works. Pyramids are wide at the base and narrow at the top. At the top of the pyramid was the king or the pharaoh. Beneath him, a series of elites, and at the bottom, the common people, all working to hold up the rulers at the top. This wasn't just one way of organizing society. It was the only way, and it repeated itself all through nature. The sun ruled over the stars. The lion ruled over the animals. Kings ruled over the nations. The whole universe was organized this way. But God had made Israel to be different. Israel was to represent to the world a new way of living, a world where all human beings, not just the king, are made in the image of God. There's still a need for leaders in this world. An orchestra is just a bunch of noise without a conductor. An army is just a mob without a general. And a nation would collapse into anarchy without some form of government. But no one is entitled to rule over others without their consent. In a world where all people have equal dignity in the eyes of heaven, the leader does not stand above the people. The people don't serve him. He serves the people. At the Last Supper, a dispute rose among the disciples about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Yeshua quieted them and told them, "You know that the rulers of the nations lord it over them, and their great ones play the tyrant over them. It shall not be this way among you. But whoever wants to be great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." If the symbol of the world was the pyramid, the symbol of the Jewish people is the menorah, the inverted pyramid, wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. A leader in God's kingdom does not lift himself up on the backs of those beneath him. Instead, he lifts others up onto his shoulders. But Korach doesn't understand this. And for this and many other reasons, God judges against him and affirms his choice of leader in Moses. Only a person of great humility can be a leader at the bottom of the pyramid, honoring others rather than seeking honor, inspiring others to reach new heights rather than climbing ahead on their own. A great leader is motivated by ideals, not by personal ambition. They are driven by a desire to influence, not a desire for power. To be a great leader is to be a great servant first. And those who serve do not lift themselves high. They are the ones who lift others towards God. Shalom and thanks for watching. If you like this video, please make sure to subscribe. And don't forget to visit simchatyisrael.org to learn more.